Well, hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. Well, as we get towards the end of the year, it's time to prepare ourselves for the incessant bleating and horn crashing sounds of feral herd animals in heat. Yes, it's time for the nomination for the Academy Awards, and the Golden Globes, and the SAG Awards, and the People's Choice Awards, and a few hundred other awards in preparation for what we in the Hollywood showbiz viper pit refer to as kudos season. It's a time for giving to ourselves, naturally. Now, it's easy to mock, but the effects on this nation of this progressive tongue bath are incalculably damaging. If I was given a choice of controlling either politics from Washington, the news media from New York, or the pop culture from Los Angeles, I'd take the pop culture in a heartbeat. You may not think that telling a simple story is more important than being armed with statistics and data and evidence and logic and reason and even eloquence, and you'd be wrong. The more complex the issue, and every issue is more complex these days, the more the story will win. Matter of fact, the story wins every time. Now, one of the great progressives in history understood this very well. One death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic, observed Joseph Stalin, the socialist dictator who killed more of his own people by far than any other monster in history, with the possible exception of socialist dictator Mao Zedong. So how does story trump evidence? Well, it's just like Stalin said, a single death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic. But why? Well, a single death is personal. A single death has a face. A single death has grieving relatives. So let me show you how the progressives use the power of a personal story to get what they want. Let's say you want to sell a ruinous policy, a huge concentration of money and power that eliminates choice from the American people and puts their lives in the hands of a bureaucracy like the DMV. Obamacare, let's say. Now, conservatives would cite studies and cost-benefit analyses, and they'd tell the horrific stories from the National Health Service in Britain, etc. But Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, stands clothed in glory on the podium of the House of Representatives. And then he points to a little old lady sitting up in the balcony. And he explains how she was turned down for a pre-existing condition, how she spent her life savings and that of her war veteran husband, now sadly deceased. He says that without this new law, Mrs. Dorothy Abigail Johnson would have died by now, but she's still alive, thanks to the wonders of this new law. And then she smiles, and the House bursts into applause, and the bill passes. Who wants that little old lady to die? I sure don't, because it's personal now. You see, it's not a policy anymore. It's a story about a tragedy. The millions of people who will die as a result of a single-payer national health care system, the number of people who lose their insurance, the number of people hit with both higher taxes and higher premiums, that's just a statistic. That's a story. That's the power of story. And that kind of story, a lone union worker standing up against an evil corporation, or a doctor discovering that medicines are being tested on unsuspecting people by an evil corporation, or a plan to enslave a Middle Eastern country by a brutal dictator acting as a puppet of an evil corporation, or detonating a nuclear weapon in the heart of New York City in order to corner the financial market for an evil corporation. Well, after a while, evil corporation is something as tangible as anything else that's been effectively advertised, a Pepsi can, let's say. So that's the bad news. But there is some good news, because despite the fact that Hollywood is constantly injecting progressive politics into the story itself is in fact inherently conservative. Just think about it. A man alone with a gun fights a powerful unseen force and rescues the beautiful woman. That has simply got to gall progressives like Matt Damon and George Clooney to realize that the only reason they're famous in the first place is because they keep playing a man alone with a gun rescuing a beautiful woman. Now, that doesn't stop them from bleating about it, though. The worst offender I've ever seen is Jamie Foxx, who had the nerve, he had the audacity to appear in an anti-gun violence video right after Sandy Hook while Django Unchained was playing in movie theaters. Django Unchained is one of the most violent, gore-splattered, gun-mad films ever made. Jamie Foxx has made a living as an action hero. If Jamie Foxx had never picked up a gun on camera, no one would know who he is either. And look, the final triumph of conservative nature of story goes back to the very first efforts of Hollywood to social engineer America towards progressivism. Back in the early 1970s, arch-progressive Norman Lear launched All in the Family. Archie Bunker was the foil. He was the racist. He was stupid, conservative, a whipping post that Norman Lear and the rest of the progressive writers would just flay each week in the person of Mike Stivic, the sensitive, educated, open-minded liberal, and yet, the American people fell in love with Archie Bunker and not with the meathead. And I think it's because no matter what words they put in Mike Stivic's mouth, the fact was that it was Archie that got up every day. It was Archie that slogged down to the loading dock each morning. It was Archie that put in 10 hours of back-breaking labor. Archie that came home exhausted every night only to be hectored by his son-in-law. You know, the lazy, arrogant, lazy, self-righteous, lazy man-child, the big liberal who could not even support himself, let alone his wife, that'd be Archie's beloved daughter, Gloria. All in the Family, completely by accident, showed how liberalism is parasitical upon conservatism. If Meathead left, he and Gloria would be homeless. Archie would be richer, better rested, and he'd live longer. So, let's get into this fight. The cultural playing field is incredibly, almost unbelievably tilted in our favor. It has to be, right? I mean, they're doing everything right, we're doing everything wrong. Elections are still 50-50 in this pop culture we all live in. So let's tell the simple stories of freedom and heroism and watch the progressive skins just burst into flames. We'll do that effect in post.